So we're fine, and we can add additional items or other business as they should arise.
Okay, great. Thanks. Okay, with that, I'll call for motion. Councillor Davis, second by Councillor Long. Councillor Ferguson on the agenda.
Sure we haven't made the motion resolved in a special close yet, eh?
No.
Okay, because I have an item, just so you know. I wanted to beat you before you.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah,
Okay, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Next item on the agenda is the adoption of the minutes of the regular afternoon council meeting on February 25th and the special council meeting for budget purposes March 4th. Moved by Councillor Ferguson, second by Councillor Davis. Any errors or omissions? Yes. Councillor Richter.
Item J1 on page 9 should read that the unsightly premises bylaw be referred to staff for a report on removal of the 250-meter limit. That was what the motion was.
Okay, so staff will look at that. Thank you for that. So that error, yeah. So that correction, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Now a motion to move into special close for items on the agenda. I don't believe there's any on table, is there? No. And so a motion, please. Councillor. Okay, moved by Councillor Davis, second by Councillor Kunst. Councillor Long, did you have an item?
You have a property item, please?
Long property. Yep, the budget minutes. Yeah, that's Councillor Woodward.
Yeah, I just have a property item and a legal item.
Councillor Ferguson.
H1 personal.
Personnel, you mean not personal. All right, so with that, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? And carries. Thank you. Okay, I'll now reconvene the regular afternoon meeting of Township Council. And the next item, there are no presentations, there are no delegations. We slide on over to F1, Snow and Ice Control Parks and Trails. Like that tab? Yeah. Okay, good. So I need a motion. Councillor Arneson, second. I have a seconder. Councillor Davis, any discussion on F1? Seeing none, F1 is the snow and ice. It's a policy for snow and ice control in parks and trails. I guess similar to the policy. Well, let me catch up, and then I'll call the vote. F1, afternoon, March 11th. No, that's. No, this is the March 11th afternoon meeting, so I'll let you catch up. It's a policy. Okay? Okay, if you want to push your button there. Councillor Richter.
Yeah, I was wondering if we could refer this for public input, because I appreciate what staff have done here in terms of putting it together, but I would like to get some feedback from the public on whether they consider this to be enough. Because, of course, snow and ice control is a popular topic.
Okay, I can maybe ask Mr. Safi if what sort of due diligence staff have gone through in preparing this policy.
Thank you, Your Worship. As the report lays out, Your Worship, this is essentially formalizing current practice, and it's an operational technical matter and subject to council, I guess, considering amendments that would trigger the need for additional funding. I don't know if it's necessary because, as I said, it's based on the current budget allowance that we have on an annual basis for snow and ice control, and it follows the, I guess, the practical considerations of resource availability and the highest priorities in terms of schools, bus stops, areas of known ice formation as well as steep sections of roads. Having said that, certainly if council wishes to take this to a public information meeting, that's something that we could incorporate.
Okay, well, and I can appreciate the budget considerations because we put so much time into it right now. Would it be possible instead, Mr. Backen, if we posted this new policy once it's adopted on the website for public information? And I'm sure if people have issues with it, they'll be in touch with us.
That can be done, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, see no further discussion. I'm going to call the question on F1. Carries unanimously. Move on to F2. This is Integrated Stormwater Management Plan. And is there a motion on this one? Yes. Councillor Richter?
Yes, I'd like to make an amended version of the motion that's before us. So I'd like the motion to read that council direct staff to proceed with an integrated stormwater management plan for West Creek with a focus on Gloucester industrial lands, utilizing funding currently available in the Stormwater Capital Reserve account up to a maximum of $250,000 with cost recovery from development within the area, comma, and further that this integrated stormwater management plan be commenced in 2019 with completion by 2020. So I so move, or
Okay.
I'm moving that.
Okay, and seconded by Councillor Anderson. So we'll catch up here. And complete. Okay, any discussion on this? 2020. Did you wish to speak to it, Councillor?
Yes, I just
there
think
we
we need to be we need to get on with this, and the wording of the motion at the beginning where it said consider directing, I think we should just actually direct staff. We've got the money there. Let's go ahead and do it, and furthermore, let's get it done now, because this has been outstanding for quite a few years now. Now that we know that the money's in place, there's really no reason why we can't get on with it.
Thank you. Councillor Arneson.
Yes, thank you, Worship. I'm highly supportive of this, and I want to thank the staff for putting this together. I know it's been rather a long discussion about the integrated stormwater management plan. I think what's interesting about this conversation at this time is that the original conversation began at a time when there was not a lot of senior level government interest in riparian areas, and particularly in salmon habitat. And so I think what's happened in the last few years is that there's been a heightened consideration about protection of habitat. And one of the things I like and think is really critical about an integrated stormwater management plan is that it looks at habitat, and most specifically, if you've identified species such as salmon that are returning to the area, I think it's important to have a baseline of information that you can provide into the understanding of the ecological significance of the area. The other thing about the area is that it is significant wetlands. And so what I would hope that we would do on the basis of this study is to try and integrate our efforts with higher orders of government to look at the new federal government wild salmon policy and other provincial initiatives. And they are really focused on protecting and enhancing our salmon stocks. And I think that this is an important step forward that the township should be taking.
Thank you. Councillor Kunst.
I'm new to all of these studies and everything, so I'm just going to walk it through and maybe you can help me out here. 2005, the province directed municipalities to follow the riparian area regulation. 2006, Township of Langley adopted streamside protection and enhancement area regulations as part of the OCP Schedule 3. But it also says that the DFO can supersede the township's SPEA, which now they're going to update. What is missing now? Like maybe I don't know. Isn't it all streamside protection? And also, since these developed areas have to conform to the DFO, should we not wait until the federal fisheries? They're going to update the Federal Fisheries Act. I believe this came out last year. So anyway, just a question.
Mr. Sefi.
Your Worship, the development that happens throughout the township outside of the ALR is subject to the township streamside protection bylaw, which is, as was referenced by Councillor Kunst, is a schedule of the OCP. The DFO is no longer involved with approvals. What the report references is a historic authorization letter that was issued and has since been expired. And as such, whatever development occurs in terms of rezoning applications and community plan amendments, not development permits, would be subject to the streamside protection requirements of the township's bylaw.
Hey, just one more question. On the bottom of here, it says, as such, the West Creek catchment developed area is 17.8%, which falls under the 20%. Does that mean there's only 2.2% left to develop, or does that mean that that's all that's been developed?
Thank you for the question. Through you, Your Worship, the requirements from the provincial regulations perspective are for any catchment that has an impervious area that exceeds 20% imperviousness must complete a integrated stormwater management plan. What staff is referencing in this report is that ultimately, when the entire developable area of the West Creek catchment is actually developed, it still will not reach the 20%. So this is not being pursued as a requirement, but rather as a direction from Council. So it's not a provincial requirement to undertake an ISMP for the West Creek catchment.
So with this, how does this help? What is it that we're missing then? I guess I'm confused as to, seem to be that we have like the RAR and the SBEA, and now we're going to spend $250,000 on 2%. That is how. Yeah, I just need to know the necessity of this.
Thank you again, Your Worship, for the question. Through you to Councillor Kunst, I guess the challenges, the constraints that we have are the resources. Had it not been for the financial implications and the staff resource requirements, I guess it would be ideally, or staff would ideally be able to undertake an integrated stormwater management plan for all of our catchments. But that's not the case. We don't have unlimited resources, nor do we have, unlimited financial funding available. With that in mind, then what we do is we prioritize the need, if you will, to undertake an ISMP for the areas that we are required to do based on provincial regulations. Those being those that exceed 20% impervious area. Having said that, as Councillor Arneson referenced earlier, and as the staff report talks or discusses, the ISMP provides a more, I guess, holistic approach than the traditional stormwater management plans in terms of taking into account aquatic habitat, wildlife corridors, essentially the comprehensive, I guess, nature of an ecosystem analysis, as opposed to that is one that is stormwater based only.
Right, thank you.
Councillor Whitmarsh.
Yeah, thank you. I just sort of wondering, I guess maybe some of the same types of things as Councillor Kunst has talked about. Maybe a question through your worship to staff. How much of the land in that area is still left to develop? I understand that if it was fully developed, it would reach 17.8%. How much is left to go, and how much, or conversely, how much of that has been developed to this point?
Your Worship, I'm going to provide you with, I guess, an acreage. I don't unfortunately have the actual percentage, but I would guess that it's approximately, I would suggest less than 1%, because the area that is left is essentially the golf course lands in Gloucester. And based on the current proposal that staff has been dealing with for a number of years, it is only approximately 50% of the golf course lands that is subject of potential community plan amendment. subject obviously to council's consideration. The golf course lands, if I remember correctly, are approximately 90 acres, so 50% of that would be about 45 acres.
So there's about 45 acres left to develop out of, what, am I reading correctly, 313 hectares?
That's correct, yes.
So about 1% remaining. There's about 1% of the land that's in that area that's still yet to be developed.
I'll have to run the calculation, Your Worship, but that sounds about right.
Okay, so this recommendation is that we would do an integrated stormwater management plan really for about 1% of the land that's remaining at a cost of $250,000. I'm having trouble wrapping my head around why we would do that at this point when it's virtually almost developed. 50% of the 90 acres remaining is going to remain as some kind of environmental feature. Maybe feature is not the right word, but environmental area is maybe better. And so I just don't understand why we would do this. It doesn't make sense to me. I don't know if we do this in other areas where we have a bit of some land still left to develop, where we'd go and do a brand new integrated stormwater management plan. And so I'm having some challenges because it seems the staff's recommending it, and yet I don't understand why staff would recommend us to do that when there's only 1% left to develop. Maybe some context around that would be helpful.
Thank you. Any further comments, Mr. Safi?
What I can state, Your Worship, is that this is based on Council's referral to staff of a previous motion that discussed in sort of similar notes or similar context the possibility of further analysis in Gloucester. And having discussed the matter further with the mover of that motion, as the staff report discusses, this is further to those discussions and the referral of that previous motion to staff.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Richter?
Yeah, I wonder if I could add some clarification, perhaps for Councillor Kuntz and Councillor Whitmarsh. This particular development was built on the headwaters of West Creek, and of course West Creek is a fish-bearing stream that empties into the Fraser River. And at the time that the Gloucester area was developed, they were using 1978 DFO standards. And so my understanding is that because the rezoning occurred back in the late 1970s, the DFO 1978 standards are the ones that are in place right now for anything in there, because that's when the rezoning occurred. Now, since then, we've had a lot of improvements and changes in streamside protection. And the other thing that I think is a factor here is when Gloucester was originally rezoned, it contemplated having a large green space, which could be like water retention type areas, the golf course. But they're taking that out now, or they're wanting to take it out. So that will come back for rezoning. And what does that do to the overall footprint of the area? Like right now it's at 17%, but that includes a golf course. When the golf course is gone, is it still 17%? And the last consideration, and one of the reasons why I'm supporting this motion, is that we've had a lot of severe weather events due to climate change. We're not going to get any less of those events. We're seeing 100 and 200-year events much more frequently now than they did back in 1978. And with an integrated stormwater management plan, I think we're in a better position to deal with those 1 and 200-year events than we are right now.
Thank you. Just get some clarification on a comment Councillor Richter made from staff. So the 17%, 17 point whatever it is percent, includes the golf course, doesn't it?
Yes, it does, Your
It's the
Worship.
entire
Yes.
Gloucester,
Yes.
including all
That's
the
correct.
roads, the golf courses, any trails.
That's correct.
Thanks. So it is 17. Okay, thanks. Councillor Long?
Yeah, I just wanted some clarification there too, because we understand that now it is the stream side protection bylaws that are in play. So the fact that the DFO are actually pulled out of the whole thing, the comment that was made that we're basing it on 1978 DFO rules, can I get a clarification from staff? Are we not basing it on our current streamside protection bylaws? And is there an inadequacy of some kind in our streamside protection bylaws that is fueling this need to do an integrated water management plan? I mean, that's, if we've got streamside protection bylaws in place, why would we need this? So I guess, is it true that this is based on DFO 1978 stuff?
Harvey?
So, Your Worship, the streamside protection bylaw that the township has must, when we developed it, we were advised by the province that it must meet or exceed the provincial regulations, which are the riparian area regulations, which are applicable in the ALR. So our streamside protection bylaw requirements actually exceed the provincial RAR requirements that are applicable in the ALR, based on the fact that it had to be done in that manner. And as far as, I guess, applicability of 1979 DFO requirements in terms of development, those are not applicable. It is the streamside protection bylaw requirements that are applicable to rezoning applications and community plan amendments.
So, and those then, Your Worship, for clarity, are current, exceed provincial regulations, and has there been, therefore, a problem in Gloucester with our application of these streamside protection bylaws that is causing this concern? Does staff have a concern, or is that, and I've heard many times that this is council-driven, so council may have a concern, but please, staff, tell us that, whether you have a concern or not, seeing how you're the experts.
Your Worship, let me just, I guess, restate what I said earlier. If the resources were not an issue, we would start prioritizing based on the area that has the highest percentage of imperviousness, and then go down the list and complete an ISMP for all of our watersheds. But that's not the case. So we have to essentially allocate our staff resources and funding allocations that council provides to the most urgent ones. And as I don't remember if the staff report references that or not, and Mr. Larson is here to correct me if I'm wrong, but in past few years we have undertaken integrated stormwater management plans for other catchments, including Anderson Creek, if I remember. Mr. Larson can nod. So, having said that, again, we wouldn't ordinarily proceed with doing one for West Creek because of the resource implications and limitations that we have. So what you see in front of you is based on, as the background section of the report states, based on the previous referral to staff of a previous motion, and then further discussions by the with staff, with the mover of that motion.
And thanks, Your Worship. Then to clarify, the Anderson Creek study that we've undertaken, what is the percentage of pervious or impervious lands there? Did that trigger the study, or did we just decide to do it?
No, that did trigger the study. Both Anderson and I just remembered the other one was Nicomeckle. So we did the Anderson one in collaboration with the City of Surrey and Nicomeckle with the City of Langley. And they both exceeded the 20%.
By very much? Were they close?
By significant.
Significant amounts. Thank you.
Councillor Arneson.
Yes, thank you, Worship. I'm just recalling the past discussions, and so there seems to be some concern that this is now being driven as some kind of, sounds like, political agenda that's going on. But what I would say is that we already had unanimous support from a prior council, and they wanted an integrated stormwater management plan. So I think, unless you reconsider that motion, I don't know how you can say no to this. This motion, as far as I'm concerned, only identifies a funding source, and in addition to the fact that it's got a maximum $250,000 attached to it, that's a global amount. That doesn't mean that that's how much it's going to cost. There have been discussions that indicate that it could be done at a lower cost. And it also has a mechanism for cost recovery. So if we think that we're spending $250,000 for naught, I would say that it's quite the contrary to that. That the $250,000, I'm glad that Council is asking questions about other integrated stormwater management plans that we have. And in principle, the Ministry of the Environment, when they came up with this number, this is not some magic number where somebody said, oh, after 20%, this is what we have to do. It was a negotiated number. And there are people who believe, and they're biologists who believe that 20% could actually be too high. And so I think you have to look at the significance of the area that you're talking about and not whether it's another 5% or 2% or whatever percent that it is. Because in fact, an integrated stormwater management plan is a holistic plan. And what it can do is to look at the entirety of the area, and it can help to provide information that will be advantageous to the whole area, not just the area that we're talking about rezoning. So if we can disconnect the rezoning aspect from our minds and just look at the area that we're talking about, it is one, from my perspective, of the most significant riparian areas that we have yet to protect in the township of Langley. And so when I look at our opportunity to fulfill something that everybody seems to be concerned about, it's top of mind, which is our environment. And our water courses are right up there, and so are salmon. So what I would say about this is that we would not in any way be overspending on this project. And even if you thought it was too much money, we can recoup the costs in something that we know will be forthcoming relatively soon. And as Mr. Safey mentioned, communities that feel they have more resources are actually mapping all of their water courses with integrated stormwater management plans because they recognize that that is a best management practice for protecting our water courses. So whatever you think is the most superior perspective of what to do, what I would say is this is the most holistic and the most best management practice to look at this water course. And I would just refer back to the fact, whatever discussion has taken place, it does say in the staff report, it is recommended that staff be directed to proceed with the integrated stormwater management plan for West Creek with a focus on the Gloucester industrial lands.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion on F2? Seeing none, I'm going to put my 2 bits worth in, a few comments. I appreciate the questions and the concerns. I think we all all of us are aware and of our environmental needs here and a desire to protect the environment. The integrated stormwater management plan for Gloucester, I find, although it sounds great, but what I've heard from staff is that streamside protection bylaw exceeds the provincial requirements. The cost recovery is going to come from future development, of which there's, I don't know, well, some say 1%, it may be 5%, I'm not sure, but it's less than 10%. And so then that's being a burden on a few developments, whereas this should have been done a long time ago, but maybe the rules weren't in place, but I don't think that's fair. I would be concerned if there weren't the protections there, but we do have the protections in place. So $250,000, even though it's going to be recovered from the development, is $250,000 that could go to maybe a higher priority area where this needs it. So I'm not going to support this. I think the prior motion of council is to receive a report. We've got that report. I see what the cost is. I'm comfortable that we do have policies in place and bylaws in place that do protect our streams and do protect the environment. And to do it at this late date in Gloucester, I just don't see the need for it. I think that money can be spent much better someplace else. So I won't be supporting it. So now I'm going to call the vote for F2. And the motion fails. Councillor Ferguson, Councillor Whitmarsh, Councillor Kuntz, Mayor Froese, Councillor Long opposed. And move on to F3, and F3 is the draft 2019-2023 financial plan, and there are 4 parts to this. We could. Oh, sorry. Oh, J2. You're right. Thank you for reminding me. We're going to J2, and this is motion to reconsider from Councillor Long. So Councillor Long, I'm going to put you on. You need to move this and get a seconder.
Can we get a direction from staff what's required then? I mean, the motion is there.
You need a motion to reconsider first, and then if that motion passes, then this is on the table, and then we deal with this motion.
Yep, so I'll make the motion, although I'm confused about the notes in there. I think the original motion was to remove 3.1 million. But anyway, I would like to see that motion be considered.
So first you move to reconsider. Okay,
Yep.
so it's moved. Is there a seconder for reconsideration? Seconded by Councillor Ferguson. Discussion on reconsideration?
Is there discussion required?
I believe there can be discussion on the reconsideration. Yes, there is discussion if anybody wishes. If you wish to speak to it?
Okay, yeah,
on the reconsideration, the reason for the reconsideration,
well,
not on the motion.
The reason to reconsider it is that there's a concern, I think, to get this part of 208 dealt with. It's been identified that it's part of in front of Willoughby Hall, which is our responsibility, and I'd just like to see it get done. So I don't know why it was taken out, but there was public consultation, to your worship, that seemed to support that it go back in.
Okay, thank you. So on reconsideration, Councillor Woodward.
I mean, yeah, it's pretty minutiae, reconsideration versus the motion itself. I mean, for me, this decision was made, and I don't hear a basis to bring it back. So I think we stick with the original decision, which was to defer this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Arneson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I also don't support reconsideration. I think we had a very fulsome discussion, and usually if I'm looking to have something reconsidered, I want to know the basis of what new information is being brought forward, not just because somebody didn't like the outcome of a vote, but in fact there is something that we actually need to reconsider. We are a quasi-judicial body, and I think that we should hold ourselves to a higher standard to make sure when we're bringing these forward that is what it's all about.
Thank you. Councillor Richter?
Yeah, I'm thinking that council did make a majority vote to defer this to April, so it's not like it's eons away. And I really don't think we should bring it back right now until we've had the opportunity to revisit it in April. So I'd like to refer this reconsideration motion to CPC.
I don't know if you can.
And proceed with the current budget.
You can't.
Why can't I refer?
The clerk is
a
nodding her head,
reconsideration?
is saying no, it can't do it. This is a reconsideration motion that needs to be dealt with here. We can't refer a reconsideration motion, so we need to deal with it. And then there's all kinds of things we can do with the motion that's being reconsidered, referral, deferral, tabling, whatever you want to do with it. But the reconsideration we have to deal with. So, Councillor Long.
Yeah, I would like to supply that information that's being requested by members of council. First of all, it was brought to our attention that the development, I forget the name of it, but the Irish development that's to the east had put in funds towards, Athenry had put in funds towards this work to be done. And that there is apparently the continuation of that project, should it ever occur, would also put more monies into the DCC program to take care of this section of road too. The second misconception I believe that council has is that it wasn't going to get done anyway this year, so may as well defer it. I would like staff to repeat to us then, if this motion does get reconsidered and the funds put back into the budget, that the area in front of Willoughby Hall would get repaired this year. So the new information is
so
council is under the assumption that it's not going to get done.
Okay. Fair enough. Councillor Woodward, and then we'll go to the vote.
I just want to clarify that some of that information I don't believe to be true. We can get that clarified if necessary, if that's a basis to reconsider it. I don't recall any mention of any funds deposited to complete these works. Also, too, the reason I wanted to speak, I just want to correct that we weren't deferring this to April. We were deferring this to the 2020 budget process, which would begin in the fall. So to me, we'd actually be reconsidering this in the budget process much sooner than April. And original rationale, which is that we wanted to look for some additional ideas before spending money, still stands as far as I'm concerned.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to call the question on the reconsideration, J2. And the motion fails. Councillor Richter, Councillor Whitmarsh, Councillor Kuntz, Councillor Woodward, Councillor Arneson, Councillor Davis opposed. And so now we move, that's been done. So now we move over to F3. And F3 has 4 parts to it, we could move all four, and if there's a desire to separate, we could always do that. It's been moved all four by Councillor Woodward. Is there a seconder? Councillor Whitmarsh. Discussion on F3. If council wishes division, we'll divide, and so we'll go one at a time. So I'm going to start with, and let's do the discussion, and we'll go through the vote. So if anybody has any discussion on any part of it, we'll do that now, and then we'll go through the vote. So Councillor Richter.
Yes, I was just wondering how we got to 3.85 from 3.92.
Ms. Sinclair.
I thought it was 3.92 last week.
Magic in the back rooms.
Your Worship, through to Councillor Richter. When we had a lot of moving parts at the end of the presentation last week, and when we got back to our desks and were starting to fund everything, we realized that the $125,000 that was recommended for a funding finance feasibility study should have been funded through one-time sources. Normally, we don't impact the tax rate for a one-time study or a review, so we moved that over to be funded through prior year surplus as a one-time project, which then left a little bit of it was slightly lower than 3.85, but on the capital side, we had about 60,000 that we needed to make up for once all the blocks settled into their places, and so we ended up at the 3.85.
Thank you. Councillor Long?
Yeah, so that 100, now this figure of $125,000, has staff got some rationale for where that figure's come from? And will there be any staff time involved, or are there meetings with consultants and so forth that might inflate that amount? So there's my first concern, that this $125,000 gets to be perhaps a verified amount for this sustainability study that we are embarking on.
Mr. Backen?
Your Worship, we're referring to effectively a one-time expenditure. As to the parameters for the feasibility study, we've not yet gone down that path yet. We've got some very preliminary information as to what available consultants could undertake and what a time frame would be, but it's a very rudimentary. That would follow, I think, afterwards.
So there are no parameters for the motion that was passed by council. Well, that's interesting. Now, I've got a bunch of subjects right here, Your Worship, that I'd like to talk about before we pass part one, which is the 3.85. There are a number of projects that have not been funded, and I just want to make sure that council is aware that by passing this budget, these projects will not be done, including I'll give you the numbers so you can reference them, EN 290, which is the annual bridge infrastructure remediation. Staff are asking for $100,000. And the justification is to avoid catastrophic failures and to better ensure vehicle and pedestrian safety on our bridges. Another one here is the repairs and improvements to Operations Center. We did approve one for $100,000 at the end of the meeting last time, but there were two others that were not approved. And one was for the repairs and improvements to the Operations Center for the Stormwater Department. And I guess it's confusing to me as to why they're under these different budgets, but I guess that's how it works. But here the Operations Center is 20 years old and many improvements required. That hadn't been funded. And then another one from Parks saying that they required additional parking and funding be utilized for electrical and mechanical upgrades. So this is our operations facility that's not going to get those upgrades that were asked for, as well as the bridge. Slope stability on 56th Avenue. Reoccurring asphalt cracks in the roadway are indicating a slope movement. So they're suggesting an implementation of an investigation reports to see that the slope doesn't slip away. Here we have on 92nd Avenue a major truck route road pavement surface that's been failing and requires milling and overpaying. So as much as it sounds great to have a 3.85, and that would be wonderful, really what we're doing to accomplish that is pushing off some major capital infrastructure repairs and maintenance to achieve that political number of 3.85. So I don't know how you want to approach this, Your Worship, but I want to make it very clear to everybody that, as I've said on the 208th, and now I'm saying on this, we're pushing off a lot of expenses in order to have this 3.85 number, but it doesn't really reflect reality. There is improvements required to our infrastructure, our operations center, that aren't getting done. So I would like to put them back in, but of course it would require the approval of council, and that's probably not going to happen. But I think we should be probably putting that back in, and I'm not sure what the number would be, but probably add another % to it.
Oh, thank you very much, Councillor Long. These are all very good points. I know every year I've been here on budget, we have to make choices, and there are items that get left out, and show up in the next year's budget where we have, they kind of slide up the line. I'm just saying my own experience.
Thank you for that. And I just wanted to say that this will be the first budget I may have to vote against, that it's just not quite high enough.
Okay, high enough, excellent.
20 years.
So, but maybe Ms. Sinclair could just add some context and some comments to that. I know the choices and the trade-offs that we have to make, and I know staff try and provide us which, the critical items that need to be done, and then the high, they rate them. And is there anything really critical that we've left out? That's what I'd like to ask.
We've got the projects that Councillor Long has talked about. They are ranked high. We have in the roads area, we probably have about 15 items ranked high that did not receive some funding. We have a similar number in facilities as well. The thing that's different about this year than past years is the employer health tax. We talked about it doing a cannonball into our budget process this year in terms of it being about 1.2% that we would normally put towards contribution to capital to fund some additional capital items. So that has definitely been the highlight of the year in terms of negative highlight. But there are definitely a number of projects, and I can't speak to them individually, not having the expertise in that area, but just knowing that they're ranked high, we would normally try and fund as many as we can.
Thanks. So that 1.22%, that employer health tax, is roughly $1.5 million that could have been spent towards capital projects, is what you're saying?
Right, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Woodward?
Yeah, no, I'm excited that Councillor Long reviewed every single capital sheet. It sounds like that's certainly progress. I'm pretty proud of the work that the council did in reviewing the submissions I made, and some of the suggestions that others made were incorporated into a budget that went from 7 point whatever down to 4.95 and now down to 3.85, funding millions of dollars in capital projects and expansions. So I'm not really sure what this means, political number of 3.85. I think that's a consensus number. Maybe the political number you're referring to, Councillor Long, is the 2.5% that you did last year in an election year, potentially not funding many of those projects that you just pulled out of the binder. So I think we've done a lot of good work. I don't know where this is coming from, and if Councillor Long doesn't vote for this budget, I think we should wear that with a badge of honor. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ferguson?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. We've sat down for hours and hours and hours and days going over this budget, and I actually think it's a pretty good compromise. Not everybody gets their own way, and I hope that Councillor Long and others will understand that we still are going forward with many projects, including McLeod Athletic Park and some road work and a number of other initiatives throughout our community. And I think that we've worked hard on this. Again, we tried a bit more on the 208th, but we've got 3 more chances at this budget. At a budget, we've got a budget next year and 2 other years after that. So we'll sit down and work through these things again. And I can't think of anybody at this table that doesn't want the best for the community. We worked hard to go over the numbers. We had the I call it payroll tax, and staff gave us an indication of what other communities were doing as far as tax increases, and they labeled it those with casinos and those with not, and we're not a community with casinos. So they gave us all the information we requested. So I'd like to thank staff. They worked hard, and council worked hard, and certainly it's time to move forward. I'm going to be supporting this budget. And I think I compliment every member of council for working so hard and commenting. And we spent a lot of time on this budget. So that's all I have to say, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Richter?
Yeah, I think there was some misinformation put out by Councillor Long with regards to we took things out in order to get to the 3.85. That is not correct. In fact, we put more things in, still bringing it down to the 3.85. Perhaps Councillor Long might like to cancel the $5.1 million in MAP upgrades, municipal athletic park upgrades, and then you've got an extra $5.1 million that you can spend on all the other projects that were not funded through staff decisions, not through council decisions.
Thank you. Councillor Long?
Well, maybe we can get staff to clarify that. I think there was a little over $1 million removed from capital, and staff also said in response to Councillor Woodward's assertion of last term there was $1.5 million, I think, or 1.2% or 1.3% of the budget was put into capital projects. So there is at least $1 million has come out of the budget since we started our discussions on it. Is that not true? Through you to staff, Mr. Mayor.
Ms. Sinclair, do you have any
Not true.
comments on that?
Through your worship to Councillor Long, I think what happened was, and I don't think what happened, I know what happened is we funded $1.9 million of the MAP project, which freed up funding that we had previously identified from reserves for that project. So by using $1.9 million in borrowing, we freed that up and we applied that to additional projects. So we, in part, we were able to replace some of the contribution to capital funding in projects with reserve funding. And then there was some left over that we were able to fund a few additional projects at the bottom of Councillor Woodward's sheet.
Well, there's still less in the budget now than there was when we first started. I'm sure there is. Otherwise, I wouldn't have this whole group here of unfunded projects. However.
Okay, thank you. Is there any further discussion on any part of this budget, of this motion? Councillor Woodward?
Yeah, no, I try not to take debate. There's certainly lots of it being dangled here. You know, the objective with the memo that I put together after reviewing the budget for a long time with both Mr. Backen and Ms. Sinclair was to find a way to fund McLeod, but not at the expense of a lot of other projects that are now been added to the budget, and to find that consensus where we wanted to finish McLeod for the commitments that we've made. Prior councils made these commitments, but last year chose to hit a political number of 2.5%, not funding that stack of projects that you pulled out this afternoon. So I don't know why we're doing this at the last second, and so I think this is a good budget, a great budget that it sounds like almost everyone is going to vote for and support based on a lot of good work from staff and from council. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? All right, I'll put my comments in. First of all, I want to say that I think they're all political numbers. I don't care. As long as I've been here, there's a number we arrive at that council is comfortable with moving forward, whether it's 2.5, 3.85, 4.95, whatever it is we do. And I don't like any of them. I mean, it'd be great if we didn't have to raise taxes, but that's the reality of our business, is that there are costs that are increasing. There's capital that needs to be spent to build new facilities, to repair old facilities, to keep our roads updated. So we can talk all day long about what's political, what's not political. I think they're all political. We have to come to some consensus amongst council on what is a number that will meet the needs of our community is first and foremost. So we'll put that aside. I'm okay with that. One thing I do know is that every item on this budget has been voted on by council, and you know there may not be that everybody voted for everything, but what's here has been approved by council, and I certainly support council. And I think there was an item or two that I voted against that's here, and I have no problem with that. That is council's will. I think council worked very hard to get to this point, and I appreciate council's work, and I also appreciate staff's work. This budget doesn't just start the day we sit down and get the first presentation from Ms. Sinclair. It starts long before that, when all of our departments submit their requests through a lot of work, and there's a lot of staff time put in getting it to us. And I'm sure if we gave everybody what they wanted, we'd be doing a 19% budget, because there's a lot of needs in this community. But politically, that's not appropriate, and staff work very hard to bring it down to something that we can work with, and they came up with about a 7.5%. So that put it in council's hands, and now what do we do with this? And I think there's been some great initiatives by all members of council in looking at how to reduce that. I know we looked at staging some of the hirings to move it a little bit further along so it didn't impact this year's budget so much, bearing in mind that we have this employer health tax looming overhead. So a lot of work was done, and I appreciate the work of council. I appreciate the work of staff in getting us to where we are. So everything that's in this budget has been deliberated on and voted on by this council, and I think the will of council is in this number. I think it'd be great if we had a unanimous vote on the budget. I think it's a good budget. Certainly, we'd always like to see it go down, and I always look at that. But we have to recognize the needs of our community, the needs of our residents, maintaining our fantastic community and the way of life that we have with great parks, great roads, and that's a costly thing to do. And so far, I haven't had anybody complain from the community how bad the roads, how bad our place is to live. They love their parks. They love what we have here in our recreation centers and our roads, and the things we don't see so much. The waterways and streams and everything we have to do. So I'm supportive of this, and I'm going to go down one by one and call the vote. And so I'm going to call the vote on the 3.85% first. And so that's F3. Okay. And it carries unanimously. Thank you. And the next one is that council approve the 2019 water utility user pay levy increase to 4.9%. I'm going to call the question on that. And that carries unanimously. Move on to council approve the 2019 sanitary sewer utility user pay levy increase of 10.79%. I call the question. I know. And it carries. Councilor Richter opposed. And move on to the council approve the 2019 solid waste increase of $40 for 240 liter and $35 for 120 liter cans. And Councilor Richter, a question on that one?
Yeah, I just want to make sure that the public understands if they use 2 big garbage carts versus 2 little garbage carts, they're going to pay more taxes. So I'm wondering if something about this particular levy could go into the township page. So people who have, for example, maybe a large green cart and they're not using the full green cart, they might want to consider swapping it out for a smaller one. The other question that I had around this is, I still don't understand why the smaller one is half the size of the bigger one, but it's not half the price. I think it should be.
I think that's the increase. So, yeah, thank you. Those are good comments. Mr. Seffi, I know when in the early days of this program where the carts came out, there was an opportunity for residents to trade down. And I know I took advantage of one of those carts to trade down. Is that opportunity still exist, and is there a cost to residents? And also the question, just want to clarify, this is an increase, and what is the total cost with the increase to our residents for the 40 liter or 240 liter and the 120 liter? I don't know who can answer that.
Your Worship, the answer to the first question, I guess, is yes. At cost, residents can request a change to their current pen. And as far as the second question, I don't think we have the number at this point. I'm looking to Ms. Eichert. Yeah.
Yeah, we have the number up there. So just. So it brings it to 160 and 80. So the final cost is still half. Plus the annual fee. Okay. Thank you for the clarification. Okay, I'll call the question on that part. Here's not working. Push it again. Let's take your finger off. Okay, it's in now, but it's not working. Yours is not working. So Councilor Richter, it carries. The Councilor Richter opposed. All right, so what are we looking at? 6:15. Correspondence. There's one item correspondence. Could I have a motion? Okay, Councilor Richter, are you moving the motion?
I move receipt.
Well, what I wanted to do, the clerk had suggested a subsequent motion. I'd like to move the subsequent
So
motion.
Receipt and then write a letter,
Yeah.
basically. Subsequent. Okay, that's been moved by Councilor Richter. Councilor Ferguson, you seconding? Second by Councilor Ferguson. Discussion on G1? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Receipt and sending the letter.
$10 a day childcare.
Just support. Carries. The Councillor Whitmarsh opposed. And we move on to minutes of committees. The Seniors Advisory Committee minutes. If on H1, if I could have a motion to receive the committee. Councillor Arneson, seconder. Councillor Ferguson, discussion. Seeing none, call the question on H1. It carries unanimously. H2 is the endorse the Seniors Advisory Committee 2019 work plan. Can I have a motion, please? Councillor Long, second. Councillor Arneson, Councillor Richter, discussion?
Yes, I wonder if, and it's just a suggestion, but it's based on the dementia training that was offered not that long ago. I was wondering if the committee could perhaps receive that dementia training as well. Yeah? Okay, that's great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Was that, what was that again?
The dementia training, one of the seniors' facilities.
Oh, I thought you said senior management.
No,
okay, I'm
dementia.
Well, okay, I'm going to call the question after
Mark
that.
might wonder.
H2.
That was a joke, Mark.
I've called the question on H2. And it carries unanimously. And move on to items from prior meetings. And I know, Councillor Whitmarsh, you weren't here last time, but we were so busy we moved this on, so you get to be part of some of these. So I-1 is a code of conduct for elected officials. Can I have a motion, please? It's a motion to receive. It says receive and consider. So certainly a motion to receive is in order, and if anybody wishes to add to that, they can. So if a motion. Okay, motion to receive by Councillor Richter. Is there a seconder? Councillor Kunst. Discussion on receipt. Seeing none, I'll call the question. That carries. Councillor Davis opposed. Just receipt. Oh, you meant to change it? Okay. Staff will record your vote in the affirmative, so carries unanimously. Any further action? Seeing none, I'm moving on to council procedure bylaw update. And I want to thank Ms. Bauer and her staff for collecting all of the ideas we had over the last little while and incorporating into this. But I would ask council that, now that we have it in front of us, that perhaps we could take it to a CPC meeting and delve into it a little bit. So I would entertain a motion to refer this to CPC so we can. Okay, moved by Councillor Whitmarsh, second by Councillor Richter. Councillor Richter, did you wish to speak to that?
This procedure bylaw is a very important bylaw for council because it governs how we conduct our meetings. So it deserves a fair bit of time and attention. And I just want to give advance notice that I've got 3 pages of commentary on it. So we need to have a CPC meeting, I think, where we don't do anything else but the procedure bylaw.
Okay, great. And I think we've done that in the past. Whenever we've had this, we've always had a good discussion at CPC prior to bringing it back. So with that, I'll call the question on I2. Yep. Carries unanimously. And we move on to Greenway Amenity Zoning Policy Update. And I think this basically is there to reflect the current land construction values, which are doing nothing but increasing. So if I could have a motion on I3. Councillor Woodward, second by Councillor Arneson. Discussion on I3. Seeing none, I'll call a question. It carries unanimously. Cannabis retail. So I've put a motion on the floor, and I know that this is something that's, since the middle of October has been legal, and I think I really would like us to have an opportunity as a council to sit down and have some discussion. We've heard, now that it's been rolling along for a little while, I've heard from concerns from people in the Agricultural Land Reserve, neighbors on impacts. We know there's certain restrictions that we have, but to have that discussion, I think, would be helpful. And also to deal with the retail issues. So basically, I'll move it, and it's been seconded by Councillor Long. Discussion on J1, just to take it to CPC to have that discussion. Call the question. That carries unanimously. And we've dealt with J2. Is there any other business? Okay, Councillor Richter. We had a piece of other business.
Yeah, we had other business coming out of the grants thing in
the CPC meeting.
The CPC meeting. What could I do with that? Okay. I guess what I want to do is I should maybe just put these on as notices of motion would be the fair thing to do.
So the last 2 paragraphs could be, because it's we can move it, or we can refer it to more discussion, or we can do all kinds of things. But Mr. Backen,
I see where you're going with that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mr. Backen, some guidance here on these.
Your Worship, I think there's 2 distinct categories of motions. There's the ones that left remaining from the CPC that were about funding for community association events. And then there's a second series that I think were touched upon, but they are effectively being funded from council contingency. So the first one could be processed, it could be referred, it could be deferred, it could be received. It depends really what the intention is.
Okay. So I think
on
in order,
the question of the $1,000 grant,
I think we'll deal with, on order, your motion to fund the Seniors Resource Center from council contingency, which passed at CPC.
Yeah.
So I would ask that we deal with that one first. That was in order, and then we'll deal with this one. So if you wish to.
Yeah, Steve's got to. So okay. I would like to.
So we'll wait for Councillor Ferguson to leave. And then we'll get that motion. I'm going to clear the queue and wait for that. Okay, if you wish to make that motion.
Yeah, yes, that council fund the Langley Seniors Resource Society's request for $7,500 for building improvements out of council priorities or council contingency.
Is there a seconder? Second by Councillor Woodward. Any discussion on that? Councillor Long?
Well, I just don't see the urgency to the outdoor sign, but I think a discussion needs to happen on another day on how we help. And I think we did fund some bathing programs and some other programs, perhaps for supplying music and other enhancements, let's say, to the services that they provide. But I really have a hard time with the sign. I'm sorry.
Thank you. Any other discussion? I know we had a good discussion at CPC, and as I mentioned earlier, a lot of motions were supported. Council, I'll support this because I know Council supported it, and I certainly support the will of Council, so I'm going to support this. And I'm going to call a question on it. Call this C1? Do we call this C1?
J2.
How do we go from, okay, I'm on the wrong agenda, sorry. J2, here we go. All right. And it carries unanimously. Okay, and now we move on to, yeah. Oh yeah, so maybe I'll get staff to help me. I think the next item that was moved over was the $1,000 grant to each community association and also the establishing a new mechanism for funding community associations. Is that the next item that was referred? Okay, so Councillor Richter, did you wish to move any of these or discuss them? Oh yeah,
yeah, I'll move them.
Yeah, something's better. All right, where are we right now? Or who would like to? Is
I'm
anybody
moving it. Yeah.
Okay, sorry, I missed that. Yeah. So you're moving both?
Sure, why not?
Okay, so they're moved and second by Councillor Woodward. Whitmarsh. So this is now on the floor. Discussion. Councillor Ferguson.
Oh, I just want to know what motion's on the table, Mr.
Both. So the last two paragraphs in the CPC agenda. Actually, it's the last two paragraphs in the agenda, and that was B4 2019 Capital Improvement Community Grants. So one is the council provide $1,000 grant to each applicant community association, and considering new motions. So did you wish to? Okay.
That's it. Thank you.
Councillor Whitmarsh.
Yes. So, I'm pleased to see these two items. I know that this is has been a bit of a challenging topic. There's lots of different perspectives on this, but I do think that these community associations do provide a significant benefit. I understand some of the potential negative aspects, and so I do appreciate the second part of the motion to look at developing specific criteria that looks at accountability and developing non-political community representation. I think those are important things as we move forward. And so I am supportive of moving in this direction and finding a way that we can have community associations be a stronger advocate and voice for our community. Just a question I had through your worship to staff on the $1,000 for 2019. I'm just wondering where the number $1,000 came from. Was that just from a recommendation from council, or was there another reason why it was $1,000 for 2019?
Your worship, it's my recollection that was a suggestion of council. I think the original recommendation from staff was in the area of $200. Council considered that and thought that was inadequate given the nature of the events. So hence there was a change to the $1,000 amount.
Okay, and so the idea of this is that this is a $1,000 grant, and it would be able to be used towards operations, not simply for hosting an event. Is that correct? Okay, and then in the second part of it, as we develop specific criteria and a new policy, the actual amount could be adjusted based on that discussion. It might be different than the 1,000, but for this year it would be the 1,000. That's okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Long.
Well, what constitutes the community association? Is there a bona fide interpretation of what one would be, and how many are there Because it doesn't have a final figure, so.
Mr. Back.
Worship, by your definition, I think it would have to have a society status. I think that's what the requirement is. And in terms of the number, I believe, was there we,
Three that applied. 5 altogether that are formed community associations within the Township of Langley presently.
Okay, so we're talking about $5,000. Thanks for that. I guess in the second part of the motion, we're doing both together, are we, Your Worship?
Yeah.
Yeah, so in the second part, we'll maybe establish a bit more, some criteria of some kind, how many members they have and whatever else we can find, maybe from other communities, what constitutes a community association. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Richter?
Yes, and I want to echo what Councillor Whitmarsh has said, that these community associations have a tremendous potential for connecting people within neighborhoods, and that's what I want to see fostered. And so I'll look forward to seeing what kind of a funding mechanism we can come up with going forward that allows them to continue to be able to do the networking work that they've done up to this point in time.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. So this would be J3? J2? Okay, still J2. Okay. Call the question. Carries unanimously. Well, it is getting late. I was going to say, is there any other business? But we got 1 minute.
I've got one. The rest I can put on later. I wanted to fund out of council contingency the Live in Langley Chinese Association to the full to $2,500 because they're just a tremendous new group in this community that I think we should be celebrating and supporting.
Okay. Maybe you just get some comment from staff on the correct why the amount. I mean, I've been to that event too. It's big, but I don't know. I know sometimes you don't need to fund the whole amount. Is that what the? Sorry.
Your Worship, from the perspective of staff, the event as presented in the grant application appears to be a community pay to attend event, and this is why it was prorated down to the $1,500 from the request of $2,500.
Well, maybe if we increase it, they won't have to pay to attend. Is that possible?
But I think we want to encourage organizations to fund. Yeah. So I don't know. It's a. Okay. Any other business? Okay. Councillor Kuntz, motion to terminate. Termination. Oh, you're too late. Councillor Davis moves it. Councillor Kuntz seconds termination. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried.